Well, thank you, John, for permitting us to stop by. I am the president of the Robert Jackson Center, and of course Robert Jackson was part of the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, and so were you. And just to help us biographically, where were you born, and sort of give me a timeline as to how you ended up in Nuremberg.
I was born in Port Arthur, Texas in 1928 on May 15th. And my dad worked at the Texas company. And he retired on disability, and we moved up into Alabama in 1940. And I went to school there, and that's where I went into the service in 1945. In December, I went into the Army and went to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. From there, I went to Aberdeen Proving Grounds for training. I was there until probably in March of 46, and I went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, where I was shipped from there to Le Havre, France. From there, I went to Bamberg, Germany. And that's when I found out I was going to Nuremberg to the war crime trials.
Now, Bamberg at that time, was that part of the security?
No, Bamberg was a receiving center. All the GIs coming in at the time went into Bamberg and were assigned to their different positions. And I was assigned to the 1st Division, 26th Infantry.
Right.
And from there, I was put on TDY automatically to the Office Chief of Counsel for War Crimes, which was at Nuremberg. And I went to the Palace of Justice, and I spent the next 2.5 years at Nuremberg.
No kidding.
And we had, the first things we did there, there was a sergeant that was with me. There was 2 of us. In fact, that's the reason why I'm here. Sergeant Wilson and I worked there together for 2.5 years, and we ran the generators that supplied the electricity to the courtrooms and to the Palace of Justice, and of course we worked out of the engineering division.
Sure.
And in 1947, I met an English girl. And since then, it's been history, I would say. We've been married for 60 years.
Yeah.
And we have 5 children. We have 12 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren.
Terrific. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. So you're at Bamberg, and they decide to deploy you to the Palace of Justice. What did you know? What did they tell you was going on at the Palace of Justice?
Well, as usual with the Army, they didn't tell you anything. In fact, I didn't even know what it was until I got there.
Yeah.
And of course, it took a while for me to understand what the history of it was.
Right.
You know, what it was going to be in history. And in fact, I was very glad to be there. And as far as being in the service, I was hardly in the service because it's more working like a civilian life, you know.
Right.
Because
John, you lived in the Palace of Justice.
we lived right in the Palace of Justice. Him and I, we had a room downstairs in the basement.
So your job while there, again, what was the time period that you first showed up at the Palace of Justice?
I would say about probably in April of 1946, the first trials were going on because Göring and Hess and von Ribbentrop were all on the docket first time I ever went into the courtroom.
Well, let's stop there for a second. You read the Stars and Stripes, and you read the newspapers about these particular Nazis. You walk in there as a young Army, member of the Army, 1st Division. What's your thought? You look at these guys for the first time, what's your reaction?
They look just exactly like the people that run your country. Most of them looked very intelligent, which they were, and you just I couldn't fathom what they did,
Right.
you know, with the country that they had. Because to me, Germany is a very beautiful country.
Right.
And I couldn't understand why they kept wanting to expand, you know.
Right. Right. So when as you walk in there, did you have a chance to see much of the courtroom activity, and what was your impression of what was going on?
To me, it was just like a regular trial, except you had more of a what do you call it, pomp and ceremony.
Right. Right.
And you had actually you had more judges. You had 6 judges, where usually you have one judge
Right.
or a 3-man judge.
Right.
And of course, they were allowed to speak to a certain extent. The prisoners were, except whenever they started running off at the head like Goring did,
Right.
then they'd stop him, you know, or try to stop him, which was pretty difficult with him. But they were very intelligent people, and some of them that I spoke to, I can't remember offhand. I think one of them was a doctor, and he spoke very fluent English. You'd never know he was a German.
Now, how would you have interfaced with any of them? Were these witnesses, German witnesses that you talked to, or just?
No, the only ones that I saw that were witnesses were the ones that were had been in the prison. Now, I had a friend that had been imprisoned in I think it's 39 or 40.
Right.
Him and his family were visiting Germany when they got caught. And they were at the Grand Hotel in Nuremberg
Yeah.
when they arrested the family, and he went to a prisoner of war camp.
Okay.
Now he was in a uniform, and he was an interpreter
Right.
for the Americans. But of course, he was in the service.
Was he an interpreter at the trial?
Yes, yes. In fact, he was so fluent with German that they sent him to different trials that were being tried, like in Frankfurt, and
Right.
you know the mini trials they called them.
Right. What was his name? Do you remember?
Pardon?
Do you recall his name?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. But it's an interesting story. We've met a few people along the way, like Richard Sonnenfeld and Gerald Schwab, who had similar circumstances. Your job at the Palace of Justice was what?
Electrician.
So,
What we did, we had 4 generators there, 60 kWs that supplied the power to the courtroom and to the palace. And of course, we worked out engineering. We supplied electrical equipment like bulbs for the lamps and lights and offices, and any shorts or anything else we had to take care of in the palace.
did you find yourself that during the trial, would there be any interruptions that would require your help?
The only interruptions we had was whenever they had trouble with the neon lights interfering with the earphones.
Ah,
It started with the roaring in it, you know, with the crackling, and we had to get what they call filters from the United States to put on the neon lights to filter it out.
oh, no kidding. I've heard that.
Yeah,
Having seen all the original movies, I've heard the crackle and snap.
yeah,
Yeah. So you made it better. Congratulations.
Now, that was early days with neon lights, right? They were-
yeah. That was
very
the
early.
very first part there, because like the Russians say, they were the one that came up with the switches, you know, that went to the different languages, and which I doubt, you know.
IBM takes credit for that.
Yeah, but that was a great idea. You could sit on what I call it was a pew, almost like in church, you know, and you could turn that dial from 1 to 5, 6, 7, or whatever you wanted, and get whatever language you wanted.
The trial itself, the first trial, this would be with Robert Jackson as the prosecutor.
Yeah.
Did you ever see him in action?
Oh yes, yep. I went through the courtroom and saw him standing at the podium, and
What was the reaction among the military folks about how the trial was going, or maybe how Jackson was doing?
Well, the military actually, they weren't into it that much. But now the civilians were very observant of what was happening. But the GIs, like myself, whenever I went over, I had no idea what the Nuremberg war crime trials was going to be. But it didn't take me long to find out. Because whenever you walked in there and saw these prisoners sitting there, you know, and you knew who they were, because you'd seen them thousands of times, you know, in the paper. You didn't see them on television because you didn't have television then. We didn't.
Right.
But it was very interesting. To me, it was surprising that America would think of something like that.
Did you have a sense of history?
Oh, yes, very much so. So did the sergeant I was with. Now, there was an intelligent man,
What was his name?
William Wilson. And he's the reason why I'm here in Lima. Him and I, like I said, we worked together 2.5 years. And whenever I came home, the place was in a depression. I couldn't find work. So I came up to see him and talked me into going to work, and I got a job as an electrician out here at Artcraft, wired neon signs. And I sent for my wife, and we've been here ever since.
How did you meet her?
First, I met her friend. There were 3 English girls. And I think I met Jean first. And we met at what they call the American Red Cross. That was the place where you went for your relaxation, you know, and I met Jean, and one time I was at the Opera House getting ready to go up to the Stark Club, which was the beer place for the GIs, and these 3 English girls came up and asked me if I had tickets for the theater. I said, yes. And she said to me, she said, I'll buy them. I said, no, you won't. I said, I won't sell them to you. But I said, I'll give you 3.
Good move.
And then she was very insistent she pay for them, but finally she realized she wasn't going to pay for them, so she took the 3 tickets, and that's where we met. And from then on, it was whenever I'd see her, and finally we dated. And
Now, did you ever see her at the Palace of Justice? The Palace?
well, occasionally I'd see her, you know, but usually it was over the phone, because she was on one side of the palace and I was on the other. She was, I think, on the 3rd floor, and I was on down about the 1st or 2nd. And the palace is a pretty good sized place.
Oh, yeah, we've been there a couple times, and yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. And but I'd see her occasionally, and once in a while we'd go to what they had was a mess hall there. We'd go to the mess hall together.
And so you stayed there right through after the main trial was over. That's the with Jackson. Then, by the way, were you surprised by any of the verdicts?
Yes, I was. I was surprised at the number, only the few that they executed.
Right.
Because you know that all of them were involved in it.
Right.
They all knew about it. They had to know about it.
Yeah.
It's like these people in the village that said, oh, they didn't know what was going on, but you know they knew what was going on.
Right. Right.
Because they, what did they call it, the glass night?
Glass.
Whenever they started working on the poor Jews, well, they knew then that something was going on.
Right. Crystal knock. Were you there when the night of the hangings? Were you?
Yes, I was at the Palace of Justice, and they had tanks around it. And what really surprised me, there was, as far as I could tell, there was no outward reaction from the German people. Mm-hmm. There was no demonstration, no hollering. It just went off like it was a regular hanging.
Did you know it was going to happen the night that it happened?
Yeah.
You did?
Oh yeah, you knew ahead of time.
Did you? How did you find out?
Well, I knew a couple of the officers, but we knew when it was going. But they didn't keep it hid.
Yeah.
I think it pretty well, the Stars and Stripes even knew about it, I think.
Yeah. Obviously, Hermann Goering
Beat him
cheated
to
the
it.
hangman and took the cyanide. What was the reaction among the GIs when that word filtered out? Did it make a difference?
Yes, they thought somebody had slipped up.
Yeah.
You know, they tried to, well, there was rumors that this lieutenant had slipped him a cyanide pill.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally don't feel that was it. I think Goring had it with him the whole time. And all he was waiting, whenever he realized he wasn't going to beat him, he took it.
Did it make a difference if you were, you know, to me, in one sense, some people say dead is dead, but it made a big difference to Goering that he committed suicide as opposed to being hanged.
Right. That forced him. You see, with a German officer, any German officer, it would either rather be shot. Now, if they were going to shoot him, it would have been different.
Right.
That's military.
Right.
But hanging is an insult.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't going to be hung.
Yeah.
So he beat him to it.
Yeah. After the trial was over, first trial was over, then you were there at the Palace of Justice.
Right.
Telford Taylor then became the chief prosecutor. Did you get a sense, was there a less interest? Not lack of.
Yes,
less
definitely.
interest,
Yeah, it dropped off. In fact, they never even let it know that he was going to be the chief prosecutor afterwards. See, although he was I liked him. He was a nice man, very nice man.
Both he and Jackson lived out in Firth.
Was it Firth?
Firth.
I remember going to Tilford Taylor's home one time to do some work, and I couldn't remember whether it was in Erlanger or in Firth. Now, we got married the first time by the Germans in Firth, by a Burgermeister. It was more comical than anything else. And then we got married later by a chaplain in the church in Nuremberg.
Well, tell me about the Burgermeister.
Oh, that was a beautiful thing. When we went into this, it was a basement place where the Burgermeister was at, and he was sitting at a desk with the secretary. And when we went in, Evelyn had Jean with her.
By the way, who's Jean?
Jean's her bridemaid.
Okay, what's her last
Jean Duck. Jean Tuck. She worked along with Jean and Joan. There was three of them: Joan Wakefield and Jean Tuck and Evelyn Beresford. And we went into this Burgermeister's place, and when we went up to get married, they just invited me up. She had to stay in the back. And as I walked up, this German woman was playing an organ that was squeaky. Squeak, squawk, squeak. And them two got to laughing. And not only was the organ going funny, but whenever he called me John Thorne, she broke up. He called her Evelina Crolot Thorne, and her name's Evelyn Charlotte Thorne, see? And her and Jean, and I was going, shh, be quiet, shh. But it was funny, it really was.
Oh.
Now, this is the Burgermeister of Perth, right?
Yeah, the Burgermeister at Perth in 1947. It was 1948, February the 27th. Then the 28th was on a Saturday. We got married in Nuremberg.
I'll be there. That's terrific. Well, interestingly enough, Taylor's house, Telford Taylor's house, was on Lindenstrasse in Firth.
Was it?
Yep.
Yeah, what's it?
And Jackson's house was next door, 33 Lindenstrasse. And for your purposes, Doug, the desk,
Yeah, that's a James.
the desk from Nuremberg, Jackson's desk was at 33 Lindenstrasse in Firth.
Yeah.
And the desk, we got it from the Army base in Bamberg.
Oh.
So that division, the security division, had gotten the desk as a souvenir from Jackson's house at Lindenstrasse, Firth, where you were nearby,
Yeah.
and took it to Bamberg, and they kept it for 60 years. And then they gave it to us.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So you were probably involved. You probably got married at the desk.
Yeah. Yeah, that was quite a time in my life, being in Germany. I'd been coming from down there in the South. I'd never done any traveling.
Right.
I'd never been overseas, but like I said, I just couldn't believe the Germans acted the way they did with the country that they have. It's just beautiful.
John, you were in the Army at this time. How did you get permission to marry an English girl?
It took us, how long, hon? About 8 or 10 months.
Yeah.
We had to get permission. I had to get permission from my dad. I had to get permission from my company commander. I had to get permission from the fellow that I was working for there at Nuremberg. And of course, I had to go up and talk to the big man, Tilford Taylor.
Really?
And her and I walked in there. And that's when he told me, "Sergeant, you take care of her."
So you had to get approval from the chief prosecutor to marry Eve.
Right.
Holy cow.
You showed me a picture with all sorts of papers and
Yeah.
packets of
Yeah, I've got a wedding picture where we're coming out of the church, and I still have that folder under my arm.
My word, just to prove that you got all those permissions?
Had the permission to do it. My dad and everybody.
Now that's new. Oh,
Yeah, and see, the reason why we had to get married by the Germans was because we were in the state of Germany at the time.
Right, right.
And we were going to be there, let's see, until she went home, until I went home.
Right.
And that would have been another 6 or 7 months. So to make it legal there, we had to get married in Germany.
I'll be darned. Isn't that some... Did you have any other interaction with Telford Taylor? Or...
No, the only interaction I had with him was whenever I was working at his place one time, the first time I ever met him. I was working on a fuse box and somebody said something to me and I turned around to look and I was looking him right in the face. And that's when I found out how tall he was. He's a big man.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Did you have any other interaction with any of the prosecutors that you recall?
No, the only ones that I recall would be Sprecher, and I just met him and spoke to him, you know.
Right.
And probably I met a number of the prosecutors probably in the mess hall and didn't realize who I was talking to because I didn't know them.
Right. When you stayed at the Palace of Justice, did they have a special dorm or for you guys, or just...
No.
Yeah.
They had guards naturally on all doors.
Right.
And but Bill and I had a room downstairs. Let's see, I would say it was probably in the south wing, and it was right down in the basement there. It was a nice place. And regular Army, you know, you had a cot and whatever else you needed, and that was it. That's where I left all our wedding gifts are still down there in that basement.
We'll check for you.
Yeah, you do that. It's in a big crate in one of them rooms downstairs in the basement.
I will. Well, what the hell? We'll look for you.
Yeah.
We're going back there in December.
Oh, are you?
We'll send your gifts.
Well,
We'll send them over.
well, sure appreciate that because they've been there a long time. I can't remember. Let's see. You know, at that time, the Army, Mr. Truman,
our friend Harry.
I was a sergeant. Then I was a corporal. Then I was a sergeant. Then I was a corporal. And I think when I got discharged, I was a corporal, wasn't I, or was I a sergeant? I can't remember because Mr. Truman had it going up and down so much we didn't know what we were. So a lot of times I never even put the stripes on because I didn't know what I was.
Isn't that a hoot?
Well, tell Greg how you got home.
Oh my God! My wife, she came home from England. I had my oldest boy was born in London, and she left almost 15 days before I did. And no, I left before she did.
Yeah, you did.
And I left 15 days before she did, and she was home. My dad had to pick her up, and I was still on my way because the Army had forgot I was there.
What?
Had forgot that I was in Nuremberg. And finally, whenever I went into the post at first, at the 1st Division, the 26th Infantry, I told them, I said, hey, when am I going home? I said, I suppose I've been discharged 3 weeks ago. Oh, the CQ said, oh my goodness. So he got to checking the papers, and 2 days later I got the notice I was on my way home, and it happened so fast I never got a chance to ship the gifts out, and then I got on one of those fast ships that took about 14, 15 days to come across there, and it took her something like 4 days, and she got to New York, and a sergeant, of course the Army was great when it comes to that. They really took care of the wives. They took care of the families. That was great. And my dad was great, so I didn't have to worry about that, but that was what a snafu.
Yeah, I would guess so. When you got back to the States, was there any interest in all of what you did at Nuremberg?
Not.
No.
Not. I had a picture taken of me in 1940. Must have been about the October of '46, where I was working on the panel that controlled the volume and speakers in the courtrooms. And the picture was taken of me working on this panel, and I think it was sent to the Meridian Star in Meridian, Mississippi. And so far as I know, I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I saw the one that was taken by the Stars and Stripes, but I didn't see the one in Meridian.
Right. You still have that picture?
No, I never did get it.
Oh, never you did get it, yeah.
No.
Do you follow it today in the sense of history? Do you, when there's articles or documentaries on TV of Nuremberg?
Oh yeah. We whatever we can. We even got the book. Sprecher wrote 2 books. Well, he wrote one, and then he wrote a volume 2, and Evelyn got the copies of them.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific.
He was an excellent person.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to ask you, when you got home, you couldn't get a job, so you re-enlisted.
Yes, I re-enlisted, and of all things, I went to work for a German,
Really?
von Braun.
Like Warner von Braun.
Warner von Braun at El Paso, working on V2 rockets.
No kidding. Well, let's talk about this for a second. Good. Did you meet him?
Oh yes, I met him. Yes, I've spoke to him.
Well, describe him. He seems like when he walks into a room, just describe him.
Whenever he walked in the room, everybody took notice.
Mm-hmm.
He was just that kind of a personality. Very intelligent man, but it was all business.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working on a panel one time that controlled the rocket whenever it went up in the air, the control panel. And it had little wires like that one there.
Right.
But there was thousands of them in all different colors.
Right.
And he'd walk up and he'd tell you, you got that one in the wrong place, you got that one in the wrong place, you're going to have to put that one here. That's just how he knew exactly what that was.
Now, were there other Germans around him at Fort Bliss? I think there
Oh
were.
yes, there was a number of them. I think there were about 11 Germans altogether. May have been more. The ones that I knew, that I saw.
Rocket guys, man.
Yeah, all of them were rocket.
Right.
Some were the fuel,
Right.
and others were working directly on the rockets.
Did you guys, was there, here you are working for a known Nazi and an American project. Was that a conversation among
Yes.
GIs?
Oh, yes. It's the same way with me. I couldn't understand. Well, in a way, I could understand. You know, we got the brains. That was the thing.
Right.
But yet and still, they had some brains on that panel, too, that they were trying. And I mean real brains.
Right.
But I could understand it. This was the future.
Right.
You know, rockets, that was it.
Do you remember any of the Americans that worked with Werner von Braun at that time? Any of the space scientists we'd call them now that were working with von Braun?
No, the only one that I recall was his name, Oppenheimer.
Was he there?
He was in White Sands, New Mexico.
True, because that's the Manhattan Project.
Yeah,
He
see?
was not down in El Paso.
No, we went to White Sands. See, we fired our rockets from White Sands.
Tell us about that.
Well, we also had one of them to get away that almost wiped Juarez off the map. But anyway, we went. The first rocket that we fired off that I was involved with, where I'd worked on the steering panel, it was another one of Mr. von Braun's lemons that got up about 13,000 feet and it went haywire and wound up over in Mexico. But that's where they started really getting them to fire off, getting nice rockets out of there. Mm-hmm. But we were using the rockets that they brought back from Germany.
Right.
The only thing we were doing was fixing and making the steering panels, you know, from the dugout.
When was this? What?
This was in 1949, 49 and 50.
Oppenheimer, I mean, they probably set up White Sands from the Manhattan.
Yeah, it wasn't in the area where we were at.
Okay. Yeah.
No, the atomic energy was completely isolated. Boy, you couldn't get. You get within 20 miles of there and they'd have somebody on you.
Yep. Interesting. So then you stayed in the Army and then quit this time. You resigned
Yeah.
or something.
In 1950, the Army came up with an order that any non-commissioned officer that wanted out of the service could get a discharge. Mm-hmm. And I talked it over with Evelyn, and I said, it looks like things might be a little better. Let's take it and see what happens. So I took a discharge. It's an honorable discharge, so I took a discharge and went back to up to Birmingham, and same thing, no work. So that's whenever I came up to see Bill. But within about a month after I took a discharge, the Korean War started. Mm-hmm. So I missed it by a month. Otherwise, I'd have never got out of the service.
Right.
Because my MOS number, which was 013, was shipped overseas. They flew them over there.
Right.
So I know where I would have gone.
Right.
But then by that time I had, 2 kids? Yeah, we had 2 kids by then, so.
Well, you get a sense of, you're part of the Nuremberg history. Is there a legacy of the Nuremberg trial today?
Never hear anything about it.
Right.
I've lived in this town for 50 years or more. Oh, we've been here longer than that. Let's see. I came here in 51. No, 1950.
I got you.
I've been here since 1950, and I've never Never had anybody ask me a word about it.
Well, I'm glad we're here.
Never even mentioned it.
Yeah.
And then Bill, the guy that I associate with in Nuremberg, he's over in Minnesota now. His wife has died. And,
But he's still alive, Bill Wilson.
the last time I saw him was back, how long ago was that, hon? That's been about 6, 7 years ago. So, I don't know, he'd be as old as I am. He's in his 80s, so. In fact, he's a month younger than I am.
He's a child.
Yeah, yeah, he's just a young fellow.
That's right.
Well, and him and I used to, I'd get him going about the north and the south. Of course, didn't make me any difference. All I was doing was needling him, but he'd get all worked up about it.
Yeah.
North, and he was from the north, and I was from the south, and
These southern guys will never give it up, will they?
boy, I'm telling you. But he was a swell guy, and I never could understand why he just decided to stay as a sergeant. That guy could have made it. He could have been an officer.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. He was a smart man.
Well, this is terrific. I'm going to say thank you, and then I'm going to bring over your boss here.
Okay, that'd be fine.
Okay?
So this is John Thorne you
Yes.
just interviewed,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Thank you, John.
Nuremberg
Right.
alumnus.
Right.